There are many ways for an artist to grow. In K-pop specifically, I think I see some of the most praise when a group or artist manages to be very versatile. I don't think I can even count how many times I've seen fans brag about such versatility, and I don't even think that's wrong. I think an artist can show a lot of growth by shedding a previous concept or identity and managing to go into an entirely different direction in a way that feels very refined and forward. But I don't think that takes away from the growth an artist can have when they carve a certain identity for themselves and stick to it compellingly. Some of the most compelling things I've seen in recent years all had to do with the art of self-referencing. And no, I don't mean continuously releasing the same kind of song or dance, hoping it recaptures the magic of the first time it was successful, as I think not being able to move past something like that is more a show of stagnation. I mean the subtle art of revisiting a story or theme through a new and evolved set of eyes and creative refinement. Looking back for 3 minutes and reframing or rethinking something you did before. Asking the question, do I believe what I did then? If not, what changed? How did it evolve? What do I have to say now? And how do I get that across in a new way? As artists, OnlyOneOf are new to self-referencing. It's been one of their core creative and narrative exercises since their debut in 2019, and frankly, there are more examples of them doing it compellingly we could cover than this video has time for. But in my begin video, I offhandedly mentioned how looking back at OnlyOneOf's work following their pivot into overt queer themes allowed me to freely recontextualize their early art that I suspected had some kind of queer subtext through an actual queer or gay lens, instead of ignoring it because I felt like I was projecting on it. So I thought, why not revisit that train of thought and start at the beginning? Their debut with Savanna and how 4 years later Beat and Beyond changed the story. Different from K-pop lore you might be more used to, especially visually, OnlyOneOf storytelling is guided by a structural universe. In my understanding, what that means is that it's not like they established a certain fictional universe or story from the start, with existing characters that are confined to the boundaries of that existing universe. Instead, OnlyOneOf have some core themes, philosophies, and topics that they structure their work around and continuously build on through and based on their experience. As one of their main pursuits is to explore human experiences, particularly ones that might be taboo or deemed as negative and are more rarely represented in K-pop. I think using a structural universe for that allows their storytelling more flexibility and freedom, alongside more broad interpretation from the audience, whose individual perspectives inform how they engage with or even possibly add meaning to the story beyond the group's own intent. Sometimes a song is a standalone case study that explores one topic related to the structure. Another time, they have more to say about that initial case study and they might release a sequel to it. Alternatively, they might release a string of singles that may sound or look different from each other, but overlap thematically in lyrics and create a new story narrative told through multiple perspectives or protagonists and world build through that. And other times, they might release a concept album that tells a specific story in the perspective of one character, but it still manages to connect each song back to other projects or storylines thematically to tie it all back together in this giant web of storytelling that informs each other and creates their boundless but structured universe. It allows them to tell stories in vastly different ways. Think, for example, an abstract music video versus a more simple to understand plot-based music video, and experiment without feeling disjointed because the stories can all be deconstructed and stripped back to their core philosophies, themes, and topics. With that context, dealing with Savanna specifically is kind of like trying to regulate a stream of consciousness. There's a lot that could be said about it and many ways to interpret it, and in order for me to convey that, we need to establish quite a few things first. Without trying to sound too dramatic, I would say there's literal levels to it. Let me explain. On one hand, there's the in-universe narrative. As mentioned earlier, in much of OnlyOneOf's work, you follow a story and narrative of a protagonist, aka a singular perspective, or sometimes plural when there's multiple protagonists, in which, for example, the lyrics are written. So it usually follows the journey of a fictional character that the members try to represent, but it doesn't really reflect the personal lives, actions, or even morals of the group themselves. Then on the other hand, there is the meta-narrative level, in which the story does relate in some way back to themselves personally or as a group and can be seen as a commentary on their career. Then within this split, you could also argue their separate philosophical, psychological, or mythological levels you could solely analyze their work through, but I personally prefer to integrate those into either of the aforementioned levels for simplicity. Now, the tricky part is not distinguishing these two levels from each other, but it's recognizing where they overlap. Because sometimes their way of conveying a feeling that is relevant for the in-universe narrative is done through the meta-narrative, or the other way around. To some degree, you always need to have an awareness of both levels to, I think, fully try to understand one of them. Long story short, in this video my focus will be on the in-universe fictional narrative, but sometimes to do that I'll have to refer to the meta. But here's the disclaimer that I won't be dissecting this meta level for Savanna in depth. For the sake of this video, I'm choosing to focus on the song's theming that explores a person's experience with sexuality and alienation in society, specifically the search for a safe haven. On top of that, I'm choosing to interpret it through a queer lens, not just because I can and feel like it for no reason, but because I think it's necessary. For that to make sense, we do need to establish a few philosophical and mythological backgrounds. I'll try to get through it fast, but it's quite a bit, so bear with me. First, I want to establish Carl Jung's process of individuation, as I think it underlines quite a bit of OnlyOneOf's work. Essentially, the belief that throughout one's life, a person goes through the process of separating themselves from others, for example, their parents or peers, to gain an individual personality or identity that leads to a more fulfilling life. In short, individuation can manifest naturally in many forms, such as seeking privacy, changing one's appearance, focusing more on oneself than others, or rebelling against existing norms and standards. More so, Jung suggests that individuation is a natural and unconscious process of self-realization, with the aim of moving towards psychological wholeness. But he also believed that the process could be halted, as people are prone to lose touch with certain aspects of themselves throughout their life experiences, and that throughout more consciously reigniting the process of individuation in a healthy manner, these aspects could be reintegrated in these new life experiences and learnings. A core part of this integration comes with setting life goals and practicing radical acceptance. Not just accepting oneself and the state of the people around you, but also accepting suffering and mistakes in order to learn from them and essentially create an even stronger sense of identity, aiming to become the best version of yourself as you move through life's challenges. Essentially, Jung believes that suffering is inevitable, and that in order to move beyond it, we shouldn't repress or deny those feelings, but rather experience them to the fullest. And while individuation or conformity can never free us from suffering entirely, the process of individuation allows us to generate personal fulfillment out of it. Introducing Savanna, OnlyOneOf say, the song Savanna is actually for fandoms and filled with OnlyOneOf's attraction more manly than the boy's beauty. Savanna is a tune that is like decadence raising its aesthetic criterion, approaching it more like Charles-Pierre Baudelaire or Arthur Rimbaud's point of view. Too many groups of boy bands have shown fresh and flattering concepts on their debut. OnlyOneOf's first love is different because it is rather burnt with thirstiness and out of breath. So let's unpack this a bit. Here they refer to the decadence movement, which was an art and literary movement in late 19th century Europe tied to symbolism and an extension of aestheticism. In the simplest way I can put it, through excessive indulgence in pleasure or hedonism that challenges traditional values and morals, decadence and aestheticism believed in art for art's sake and self-indulging in excess. Decadence was also a harsh reaction to romanticism and rejected the notion that art had to follow the societal rules and traditions of the industrialized world and its materialism. Again, believing art should be a space free from society's morality, politics, or science, instead of being confined by the existing structures of the era, as they believed that practicing art like that would pigeonhole it and only lead to a decaying quality. Originally used as an insult by critics calling these works a product of moral decay, Baudelaire was highly inspired by Edgar Allan Poe and seen as the father of the movement and wore the label of decadent with pride, using the term to include the subversion of traditional categories in pursuit of full and excessive gothic sensual or sexual expression. While there were many other decadent writers, OnlyOneOf particularly point out Baudelaire-inspired Arthur Rimbaud's point of view, who had his own more surreal and symbolist flair. At 19 years old, he managed to not only modernize and revolutionize poetry with his words, he was able to reach the French youth in a way no one else had at the time, his most notable work being A Season in Hell, a poetic prose in which the narrator embarks on a journey through hell. Rimbaud deals with his turbulent, intense, yet violent gay relationship and breakup with fellow older writer and lover Paul Verlaine, but also explores the conflict of his own doubts between himself as one, a seer poet willing to continue his path ahead to find light, going to extremes to find an existence beyond the reality of his senses, and two, his disillusioned self, ready to turn back from the journey. His is a perspective filled with contradictions. Anger, passion, hope, despair, revolution, creation and destruction, lust and disdain for life, for the world, and for its systems. By all accounts, the writing is self-indulgent in excess. It's his uncensored suffering and a raw, constant process of self-realization, loss of innocence and youth, and by many considered an attempt at finding meaning in an unforgiving and chaotic world. Rimbaud publishes the book in 1873, then loses interest, burns it, and walks away, followed by walking away from poetry altogether. In all senses, I think Rimbaud ends up representing impossible desire, informed by his own queer experience. This is why I argue that denying Savanna a queer perspective would be like ignoring Rimbaud's own. Savanna is also highly concerned with the Jungle Book coined law of the jungle, and the idea of survival of the fittest, describing their world as one where the strong prey on the weak, and where people, like animals, are driven to lengths such as brute force to ensure their own survival in the world above all else, regardless of the sacrifices they have to make and the people they need to hurt. Another influence prevalent in all of OnlyOneOf's work is Dante's Divine Comedy. Fascinated by religion and the consequences of people's actions on earth, it tells the tale of Dante trying to aspire to heaven but having to travel through hell and purgatory to get there. I think Savanna and its aesthetics are mostly interested in the first poem, Dante's Inferno, in which he navigates the depths of hell, symbolized by his journey through its 9 circles, each worse than the one before: limbo, lust, gluttony, greed, wrath, heresy, violence, fraud, and lastly, treachery, in which Satan himself resides encased by ice. This is a very basic and simplified summary of the work, as I think its relevance to the song is mostly implicit and aesthetic compared to other OnlyOneOf songs, so if you want to dive more into it, I recommend you do it on your own time. Written by Hale, or Eveuse at the time, who was also inspired by Poe, at its core, when reading the lyrics, Savanna, like Decadence, is a sensual, exhausting, sometimes grotesque, rebellious, and desperate show of alienation. Like Rimbaud, the protagonist struggles with his individual identity in a world he feels has no space for him. Not only is he looking for Savanna, which I interpret to be some kind of secluded dry land cut off from society, to try his luck at finding paradise, he also feels an impossible desire for a beach in Savanna to escape to. As savannas, by definition, don't have beaches, this is a place or person clearly beyond the limits of nature's reality where he believes he could be himself, free from society's structure, its morals, sciences, and religion. The journey is very contradictory. The protagonist both struggles with his hopes and desire, pushing him into an endless yet sometimes confident search for a self-realized existence by rebelling against society, but also his disillusion, as he is exhausted and consistently falls back into the habit of trying to assimilate with society in order to survive. The process of finding freedom drives him to the edge, so mad that he, like Dante and Rimbaud, seeks out and experiences another hell in Savanna in pursuit of reaching paradise. In my opinion, the queer or gay perspective in Savanna is at its most basic level a wish and search for a place where the protagonist can be himself, free from the law of the jungle and current state of society. In other words, the heteronormative or queerphobic world that they believe they currently live in and is hard-pressed to make space for queer folk. Alienation to queerness is like water to a fish, a universal experience we can all relate to, and I relate to Savanna for that reason. I think this is also where the decadent point of view that they refer to could be the most prevalent. If we know that the movement was a response to the perception of art succumbing to sterile societal rules and structures, sure, Savanna's self-indulgently sexual and darker, if not uncomfortable identity can be seen as somewhat of a departure from those rules already. But the queerness of it is what I think makes it feel truly its own and an undeniable rejection, one that emphasizes the gay perspective, albeit subtly, in an industry and society that would rather pretend that this gay perspective doesn't or shouldn't exist at all, and where acceptance is still actively being fought for and met with violence. Moreover, a few lyrics and things I specifically want to point out is that in the song the protagonist talks to what seems like a gender-neutral lover that can both be seen as a literal person that they want to take with them to paradise, and a metaphor for the paradise they seek, as this person is framed to be the object of their desire. And he literally says they are like a beach from Savanna. I think you could also interpret it as them trying to find a person who could be this place of solace for them, just like how in popular culture people can refer to other people as their homes without referring to a physical space at all. In any case, I think it's pointed because at the time most of OnlyOneOf's lyrics would be gendered and usually refer to a woman. But Savanna did none of that. Sure, again, if you really want to, you could ignore this and think there's nothing gay about it. But I won't. I think it's inherent and intended subtext. The protagonist is thirsty for this person, desperate for their ocean, and with every sip of water he takes, it's still not enough. He feels the desire to indulge even more, and nothing manages to satiate his desire, driving him into excess. Now I know there's some debate on whether the real lyrics of the chorus are "I don't give a shit what they think about us" or "I don't give up, shake what they think about us." And my answer to that is that despite having some different nuances, I think it's both. "I don't give up, shake what they think" to me reads very resilient. And I think it puts a very clear picture in your head that despite the circumstances and the words or violence thrown at them that they're very painfully aware of, they will try shaking off the things holding them back. While I think "I don't give a shit" is the most clear, no bullshit attitude someone can have outwardly when they have a strong internal philosophy and confidence in pursuit of their self-realization that they want to reaffirm. For those reasons, I can't see why I'm supposed to pick between these lines when I think they enhance each other. Because what is a journey pursuing a non-alienating society if not both resilient and sure of its own philosophy? The bridge follows this, saying,
넌 생각하지 마. Nobody knows here. 여기엔 없어 단둘이만. Baby, we can take my time. Baby, we can stand by my side.
It reads as if they finally found the place they were looking for, except it's followed by the final chorus in which we hear they're still looking for a map to Savanna. Regardless of their hopes and desires, they haven't found their paradise yet, and they don't know how to get there without someone or something else showing the way. And it loops right back into the beginning of the song, just like a never-ending circle. In the music video, I think all the members in some shape or form are supposed to represent the protagonist and or the other person they're speaking to. I think the gay subtext here is especially pointed in the scenes where we watch two of them literally search for and run towards Savanna together, just like the lyrics portray. Additionally, something I want to point out is that the music video constantly makes use of infrared and thermal cameras, which are often used for hunting and is technology that aids us in finding clarity in environments that are too harsh or obfuscated for our natural senses. I think the use of it represents, on one hand, the boys feeling hunted like prey by the world they're trying to escape, especially when they try to blend in with society that keeps telling them to put their head down, and on the other hand, their own hunt for light and clarity with Savanna as their prey. Considering the overall aesthetic though, I think the environment they're in is supposed to look akin to hell, clearly desperate in a world different yet an extension of their own. It's supposed to feel uncanny and a bit uncomfortable or corrupt, but also sentimental. Red, yellow, and orange paints the skies, and fire, smoke, and vehicles are all around, either driving them to the edge of madness and borderline, or framed as unusable transportation, showing they're stuck in place. Fire is both digital and physical, the lines between real and fake blurring constantly. And this all happens while we keep cutting back to the scene of them dancing between two fire trucks that bring them back to Earth, disillusioned whenever the faucet opens, ready to literally rain on their parade. This Earth being another form of personal hell in which they feel trapped. The boys want to self-realize but are held back by these environments they can't seem to escape. The members are stuck and they never smile. They are trapped in an endless circle of hell. One which they seek to escape to, one that they try to escape through, one of their own creation, and one that is simply their lived experience. The distinction between each hell blurring as they constantly trade one for another. After all, they think they are in hell, and therefore they are. Before moving on, I think their way of representing suffering and struggling with individuation related to before becomes even more pronounced if we analyze the music video a bit more at a meta level. Aesthetically, the video was also a reaction to the existing contemporary boy group and industry environment that to some, including myself, felt more and more pigeonholed at the time. And it's also where I think the decadence angle shines through a bit. Now I have to preface this with saying that any example I use here is not a value judgment towards these artists. I merely want to showcase how these industry norms contrasted against OnlyOneOf's use of similar aesthetics. Visually, Savanna has quite an edgy and dark aesthetic, and this aesthetic was usually used for more hard-hitting songs, not just from idols, but was also quite popular in the K-hip-hop scene. Now contrast these to the sound of Savanna. I think them using such a recognizable aesthetic for such a mellow and chill sound evokes a bit of an uncanny valley feeling. And I think that fits really well with the music video trying to visualize a world that isn't quite right. On top of that, the music video is not scared of getting a little weird and self-indulgent with editing or subverting more visual standards. The music video is purposefully darker, more sensual and sadder than others, to the point it was hard to get a clear view of the members individually, let alone a view of shown happy faces. Which is a stark contrast from the usual clearly lit point A to B scenes and beauty shots group prefer and are expected to show, where even if there is a darker or harder to see aesthetic, idols usually don't get lost in the environment to the extent Savanna does. Similarly, Savanna still assimilates with the self-indulgent and popular at the time hypebeast and brand print styling, yet subverts the message of grandeur, access, confidence, and materialism often attached to its culture. Here, I think wearing and conforming to the trend is less a representation of aspirational confidence and belonging to community than it is depicted as a means of survival and suffering, treating something deemed desirable by society as something personally undesirable while feeling forced to participate in it. By referring to these industry aesthetics like this, Savanna also becomes a metaphor for OnlyOneOf's career and their struggle to find balance between wanting to pursue a risky, perhaps decadent, yet completely unique and self-realized existence in the industry, and the need to conform and adhere to certain existing frameworks and trends to be accessible to the industry's existing audience, whose attention is increasingly split between groups trying to survive in their already oversaturated landscape. Now, that was a lot, and believe me when I say there's much more to be said about Savanna than I have time for. Savanna's philosophy and journey is what I would consider part of their thesis, and one that comes back into play many times throughout all of their work, especially title tracks like Sage, Angel, Libido, or B-sides like Desert or Instinct, as they continue to explore the war between good and evil, their relationship with religion, alienation and sexuality, or even the grotesque, in what feels like a never-ending loop or process of self-realization. And honestly, their connections to Savanna and their storylines could have entire videos of their own. However, Savanna is never as blatantly referenced as in Nine's solo song beyOnd, and for good reason, as I think it completely reframes Savanna and rejects the conclusion Savanna initially drew, pushing their storytelling forward. When beyOnd came out, all my suspicions about the existence of Savanna's queer theming were confirmed. Me relating to that song was no longer projection and wishful thinking that I talked myself out of when considering the OnlyOneOf quote-unquote canon. Here it was, an explicitly queer song attaching itself to Savanna, all by OnlyOneOf's own design. However, before we can dive into those parallels, we need to widen our scope a bit, as beyOnd is not a standalone song. It also falls under the larger umbrella of OnlyOneOf's undergrad idol project, also known as the B-Series, which was a series of 6 solo songs and music videos divided in 3 pairs, which followed and represented 3 different gay love stories, dedicated to the community. Beat by Mill and Beyond by 9 making up the final story of the trilogy B5 and 6. Compared to Savanna, these solo music videos are also much more straightforward narratively and plot-driven, as it's not all of the group abstractly representing a protagonist as a single unit through symbolism. Instead, each member represents one character with a clear identity and life more rooted in realism. The B5 and 6 music videos basically follow the same events, except they are told through each boy's perspective. In Beat we follow Mill and in Beyond we follow 9. The narrative is mostly chronological, with the exception of one scene that appears at different moments in both perspectives. And I think it's because this moment is actually their first meeting and the start of their story that the music videos kind of treat like a flashback, which would explain how the characters act throughout. Another reason why I think this is because the first teaser of the story was also this scene, including footage that didn't end up making it into the music video, and with different coloring. Now, I could be wrong, and I think in the grand scheme of things, whether I am or not wouldn't change much, but I think this makes the most sense. Another thing I want to establish before diving into the story is that throughout the B-series, there is a lot of paper crane symbolism. In Japan, China, and Korea, the crane is believed to be a mythical creature that lives for 1,000 years. The crane is thought to represent good fortune and longevity, and its wings are believed to provide protection. More importantly for this video though, in Japanese folklore, it's alleged that a person can be granted one wish if they fold 1,000 origami cranes. To paraphrase, the act of folding them symbolizes patience, hope, and good fortune. For the sake of clarity, instead of separately summarizing the music videos, here's what I interpret their visual story to be by integrating both perspectives in what I believe to be chronological order. The story starts with Mill walking into school and getting intercepted by a crowd of bullies who take him out back to harass him. Based on his reaction, we can kind of assume that this is a regular occurrence, and he doesn't try to fight it. While this is happening, another guy walks past the area, sees what's happening, and intervenes. He surprises the bullies and in their confusion grabs Mill. They look at each other for the first time and they run away, eventually losing the bullies chasing them. Later in class, Mill looks up to see a new student introducing himself and their eyes meet each other instantly, clearly in recognition of what happened earlier. The boy, now introduced as 9, takes an immediate liking to him, while Mill still looks a bit awkward about the intention. After class, 9 sees Mill get hassled by the same bullies again and immediately swoops in and brings them to a secluded spot where Mill tentatively gives him a lollipop and their friendship starts. What follows is 9 trying to get Mill to warm up to him, not knowing the poor guy is sporting a huge crush on him. First, we see this through Mill drawing 9 while he's out, and Mill's hesitation as he hides when 9 notices him, followed by those same bullies seeing Mill's drawing and shaming him for it. 9 sees the exchange and immediately runs in to help. Meanwhile, Mill also runs out. Here you also see the other students just sitting by and watching him get bullied instead of helping him, which I think is a commentary on the bystander effect and how no one is willing to step out of line and essentially challenge social norms in fear of getting ostracized. The boys end up literally running into each other on the stairs. Mill drops the notebook, and 9 notices what it is while they try to pick it up, giving him a questioning look. Mill runs away mortified and frustrated at the exchange, while 9 is left probably realizing what that drawing means, a confession of his feelings. Sometime after this, it's not clear how much time passed, 9 finds him in the art room and encourages his affection by posing for him, sunlight and rainbow flares shining down on them. Now I think this scene is both literal, like they definitely had this exchange in the art room in the story, but I also think symbolically this art room can be seen as Mill's inner thoughts and affection. Because in every easel we see there's art of 9 on it, and while he could have just done all that, I don't think it would have been there if we are meant to think it's only a communal space multiple people are using, especially considering Mill would have no reason to carelessly leave his art around to be found by the kids bullying him. In any case, I think in the symbolic sense, 9 walking in represents him meeting Mill where he's at about their relationship and his acceptance of the confession from earlier. I think it's unclear if they're dating yet, but they're definitely mutually romantically involved from here out. After realizing the reason for him being bullied probably stems from Mill being gay, or generally queer, 9 makes a point to be publicly affectionate with him and not allow Mill to think he's weird or should be scared of being affectionate towards 9 himself, posing for his art around others regardless of the stares, and constantly staying together and facing everything head on. But 9 also continues his affection in private. They spend most of their time together in a utility room hideout, where 9 tries to help Mill become more comfortable around him and gain confidence in himself. This is also shown through Mill taking off his glasses when they're alone together. The room is framed as a safe haven for them, rainbow lights all around, showing that they can explore their feelings freely with no issues within that bubble. Here they also celebrate 9's birthday, and after blowing out the candle together, I think we get a pretty clear show of 9 being ready for more with Mill. We cut to a new scene. Again, it's not clear how much time passed, but 9 asks Mill to meet him at a food joint after school. While on his way though, 9 runs into the same bullies from earlier, and they quite literally jump him and beat him up. After this, we cut to Mill in the doorway of a phone booth at night, still waiting for 9, jumping out to catch him worriedly when he sees 9 walk up to him all messed up. And he immediately brings him back to their hideout, cares for his wounds, and stays beside him. 9 takes this as a sign to drop all hesitation and earlier pretenses, and they finally kiss. I've already delved into the symbolism of the music videos a bit, but I need to stress the relevance of the phone booth and this last sequence overall. If you aren't aware, or if you haven't seen my Begin video, the phone booth is present in every solo, and I believe it's a narrative device used to clue you in on a character's mental state and their emotional attitude towards the other person. For example, Yoojung was framed inside of the booth to show he had no intention of going out of his way to step out of his comfort zone, but the door stayed wide open for someone to come in and join him. In contrast, VA was framed inside the booth as well, distracted with calls, but despite knocking and smiles, there was still a clear wall of separation between him and Junji, causing issues in their relationship down the line. In the case of Mill, however, he was already at the edge of the booth while waiting for 9. And when he saw the boy walk up to him hurt, he threw caution into the wind and jumped out of his comfort zone to help him. Throughout their relationship so far, it was mainly 9 going out of his way to protect Mill and helping him gain confidence, supporting him into reaching the edge of the booth. Finally jumping out of the booth was Mill meeting 9 where he was at, just like 9 had done for Mill earlier. Through the love and support he received and faith they had in each other, he was able to return the favor for 9 and take on a role as a healer, concluding they would stick together and heal each other from the violence the world throws at them in response to their relationship. Now you might be wondering why I mentioned those cranes earlier when their story doesn't feature any. And that is exactly why. Compared to the other two pairs, where the cranes are incredibly important in showing their attitude towards themselves and the world, where patience is a key factor, the lack of cranes means that Mill and Nine have no patience and refuse to wait around and wish for things to get better by being the change they want to see. Now don't get it twisted. This is in no way meant to validate one approach over the other, as I think the point of the entire solo project was to show all different and valid responses someone can have to the world when it comes to their queer or gay lived experience. But this is how Beat and beyOnd approach it. Now based on the visuals, it might seem like Mill's character is very timid, weak, or even scared, initially struggling with a more bleak perspective about his place in the world. But this is actually completely contrasted by the song and the lyrics. Something I find striking is that Beat as a song is the first in the solo run that turns mostly introspective. Written by Hale, Nine, KB, Maverick, and Taeyang, the lyrics aren't much about how Mill's character feels about another person. It is about how he feels about himself, his identity, his place in the world, the recognition of a world he dislikes, and his faith in the inevitability of a better future for people like him. Not to mention the clear reference to Michael Jackson's Beat It, a song about rejecting toxic masculinity and violence that leads to nowhere. Beat reaffirms the message by highlighting Mill's willingness to swallow his pride for now in order to not adopt toxic masculinity or escalate violence he believes is senseless. Beat doesn't necessarily give all the answers, but it's confident and it reopens the theming of Savanna. With Mill's accelerated vocal delivery and Beat's thunderous beat, reminiscent of the yearning for a better society and desperate search for this better place, Beat is the storm that reawakens the exhaustion of feeling stuck in place when the inevitabilities and course for the future seem so obvious and reachable. And fittingly, this is exactly the song that leads us into beyOnd. While it stands on its own, beyOnd is a song built around paralleling Savanna. Aside from having a similar, relaxed sound, the lyrics, written mostly by Hale again, with some input from Nine, talk about falling in love, where the love interest is being likened to a winter flower that can, similarly to Savanna, be seen as both a literal person, but also a representation of the protagonist's hopes and desires. The lyrics constantly quote and revisit themes from Savanna. For example, they bring back those chapped lips, wanting to get drunk on each other, the boy asks for the other to join him again, and both songs feature the same line in the bridge.
Baby, you can take my time. Baby, you can take my time.
However, this time there's a different philosophy, and this is most clear in the line, like a flower blossoming on ice, which parallels Savanna's like a beach from Savanna line. At first glance, they might seem like equally impossible natural phenomenon. But while savannas don't have beaches, winter or dew flowers do exist in reality. Dew flowers, also known as chrysanthemums, are a genus of succulents in the ice plant family. The name dew flower referring to the leaves that are covered with papier, which look like dew or glassy beads. There's more than 100 colorful species, but the most common ones are the Chrysanthemum floribundum, also known as the rosea ice plant, and the Chrysanthemum speciosum, aka the red ice plant or royal dew flower. For the sake of simplicity, I will focus on the first one, as it's known to be more resilient and common. In the simplest way I can put it, the ice plant is a creeper evergreen plant that can grow for many years. In order for the flower petals to bloom, the plant needs a lot of exposure to sunlight, making them the most colorful in late winter, spring, and early summer. However, the plant is not actually very tolerant towards high temperatures. So in order for the plant to grow and survive the months in which it blooms the most beautifully, it needs the winter rainfall, as it can absorb and retain the water that frosts over it very well. On top of this, the plant has strong roots to combat erosion, and the density of the leaves protects it from heavy rain and wind. As it's a creeper plant, it's able to expand its surface area quite a bit, and this growth happens the most in the winter. In summary, because the plant is so resistant to harsh conditions, the plant is evergreen and stays functional throughout the year, allowing it to take up more and more space for itself as the years go by. In this process, the winter is key, not only because of the season ensuring its growth and survival later in the year, but also because the plant is able to remain beautiful and lush during dreary winter times, while leaves of non-evergreen plants usually die off. The plant is able to spark hope and lift the mood. Essentially, beyOnd slows down the pace, a calm to subdue the storm akin to Nine's character being the calm to Mill's storm in the music videos. beyOnd realizes that Savanna is not an endless search or an impossible place, What they seek is no longer a beat from Savanna. Instead, the winter flower is presented as a symbol of hope in harsh conditions, with lyrics such as
얼어붙은 입술이 갈라져 빼빼 말라버린 내 맘에 한 줄기의 너란 빛이 내려 조그맣게 너가 맺혀 저기 멀리 봐 꽃이 피워 달린 내게 winter come again 여기 내 옆에 누워서 나와 같은 꿈을 꿔줘 겨울이 찾아오면 나의 일기로 내가 너를 훌쩍 비워줄게.
The song still ends on a questioning note. They haven't found their place of solace, and the winter flower hasn't fully bloomed yet, but it feels closer than ever, and it finally feels in their control. beyOnd takes Beat's desperation and proactively decides that with hard work and faith, they can usher in a new society by nurturing the dew flower to make it happen. Because even in the harshest environments, with a lot of care and just enough sunlight, the dew flower can bloom, even if blossoming a flower on ice seemed like an impossible task at first. In summary, the story of Beat and beyOnd is quite straightforward. Boy meets boy, and they find comfort and strength in each other, while the world around them is hard-pressed to make space for them. Instead of searching for a beach in Savannah that doesn't exist, they set their sights on nurturing the dew flower to bloom. When faced with alienation, they work to make space for themselves when it isn't given to them, instead of waiting for someone else to show them a map to Savannah. They don't know what's beyond this loop they've been stuck in just yet, but they're sure they will. In context, I think Savannah shows the struggle of trying to escape from existing society by treating it like an other, while allowing that society to stay within its framework and uncritically pass down traditions. Yet Beat and beyOnd highlight the strength of youth and the next generation in changing existing society and the importance of nurturing change from the inside. In Beat and beyOnd's point of view, they don't need to leave. They accept the reality of their situation. Because as long as the seasons keep changing, progress is inevitable. All it takes from them is sunlight, confidence, and resilience. There's a saying, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. The boy in Savannah drove himself mad by trying to indulge in his impossible desire again and again. But the boys in Beat and beyOnd found a way of indulging that turned their desire into a possible one. Though we should remember, arriving at that mindset was not without an important narrative journey throughout their structural universe. As mentioned earlier, the songs released in between Savannah and the solos would ask similar questions to Savannah, and had characters explore different journeys. And I recommend you to explore these even if this video didn't have time to go into depth, because let's say early releases like Savannah tentatively opened the door for their queer perspective, and say a release like Libido took OnlyOneOf's queer perspective from subtext to text. Similar to the process of individuation, it was through the building of the structure that releases like Beat and beyOnd could naturally take this overt queer approach and point towards future possibilities. In a show of growth and self-realization, OnlyOneOf didn't need to completely reinvent themselves. They didn't need to distance themselves from the stories they were telling before. Instead, in 2019 they wrote a story, one that they keep subtly building on until they finally revisited it in 2023 with more confidence than before, and allowed for the story to consider another outcome in a way that felt natural, logical, and true to their direction as artists, creating an even stronger identity for themselves. And who knows, maybe next time they revisit it, they'll have even more to say. Thanks for watching. Taking inspiration from my lovely friend whose content you should definitely check out, this part of the video will be a mostly brief explanation and acknowledgement of theories I had while writing that I found hard to situate within the main part of the video for various reasons, but still were perspectives I wanted to include. So let's get into it. In the Savanna music video, there's quite an underlying focus on the digital, like digitized fire or a representation of virtual spaces, which reminded me of one of the most popular philosophies of the early net that emerged in the 90s, digital or cyber utopianism. In short, it was the belief that cyberspace would be a space free from the industrialized world, and that the real or physical world and its governance and morals would have no power over it. Its society would be free and equal. And this is best represented in Barlow's writing. Your legal concepts of property, expression, identity, movement, and context do not apply to us. They are all based on matter, and there is no matter here. We will create a civilization of the mind in cyberspace. May it be more humane and fair than the world your governments have made before. Sound familiar? I think with this perspective, you could argue that we could consider the virtual world to be what the boys in Savanna believed to be a possible embodiment of the Savanna they were searching for. It's also not a coincidence that queer identity and community has historically tried to find or create a home in the virtual space, from early BBSs, Usenet news groups, and independent websites to today's platforms. But here's the fallacy. In practice, while some still hold close to the values of digital utopianism to this day, its desire for a world that is separate from the one that already exists has been rendered impossible, emphasizing the same issue Savanna's conceptualization of a utopia and world completely separate from their lived experience had. All in all, I think this perspective is fun to keep in mind when engaging with Savanna, but also when considering Savanna's relationship with other releases that actually do focus more on the virtual space, such as Angel. In Beyond the line, I want to wind back the clock with my hand because I want to see you even earlier also neatly ties into the theme of trying to turn back time the group has explored in songs like Time Leap, Time Machine, or even the Sage music video. While those songs frame that theme with a negative connotation such as regret, guilt, and sadness, in Beyond it has a more positive connotation, representing how elated the boy is for his hopes to be realized, again showing a tangible shift in the evolution of their storytelling. While I didn't dive into Savanna choreo comprehensively, what I did want to point out is that as mentioned by Yoojung, this move represents the eye of a savage beast, such as a tiger or a lion, playing into the song's theme of the law of the jungle and their characters not fitting societal norms and standards. Additionally, the formations in this section of the Savanna choreo are paralleled by the Libido choreo, establishing a link between the two songs. Lastly, the confidence in their identity and relationship the characters in Beat and Beyond have is also nicely represented by the bright and abundant rainbow lights in their phone booths in comparison to the other solos. In addition to the time jump during the phone booth scenes, showing that Mill had enough faith in Nine to keep waiting for him after dark, while Nine also had faith that Mill would still be there waiting for him and be ready to take care of him. So that was a lot. Thanks if you made it through. This is the rant part of the video where I just talk about some thoughts and the process. It's not crazy relevant to the analysis, so feel free to click off here if you already got what you came for. Now I think I need to clarify that self-referencing can be a slippery slope, especially when an artist does it a lot. There are times when they do it better and more compellingly than others. And when you do it a lot, those differences often become more pronounced. And that is okay. Creativity is not linear, and growing pains are to be expected, and it's even good to recognize them. The same applies to OnlyOneOf. So I hope people don't walk away from this video expecting all their attempts to have been the best. They definitely had their own rough patches. But regardless of when that was or wasn't the case, I just really wanted to highlight and celebrate an instance where I thought they did it incredibly well, because it's not easy. I also think their commitment to it is something to respect. In K-pop nowadays, or even pop more broadly, I often feel that debuts don't matter anymore beyond the first release being good and exciting. It's almost unprecedented that a song like Beyond is still so informed by and tethered to their debut conceptually and philosophically 4 years after its release. I think there's only a handful of artists I can say have done or would do the same in the industry right now. Similarly, I'm not here to claim definitively that Savanna was made with the established fact that they knew they would go from gay subtext to text in the way they did down the line. Again, you can interpret the song beyond the gay perspective, but I appreciate that when considering their initial direction, they at least decided that they would add the queer subtext, regardless of if it was set in stone or not, and gave themselves an opening to explore it further down the line if it aligned with their vision. And that is a level of detail that I really appreciate and respect. So to wrap it up for real now, despite its 10 rewrites, I think this might be the fastest script I've ever gotten off the ground, considering its size, yet one I was the most worried about. Maybe not to the extent of the anxiety I had with the Begin video, but Savanna is a very loaded song. One that you can interpret in like an unlimited amount of ways, if you wanted to, and that's what made it scary. Then add 2 other songs to the mix, with their own identities and a different approach to storytelling than Savanna, and you get a monstrous amount of loosely tied together ideas you have to consolidate and make understandable for yourself and the people you want to share it with. Naturally, all my analyses are self-indulgent. They're my opinion, But with previous videos, I've always wanted to try and stay as close to the canon as possible while infusing my personal flair into it. And for this one, it quickly became clear to me that it had to be more opinionated than the others. And that scared me because that means things people can disagree with, or the fear of people taking your interpretations as fact when they might not be, or getting so scared of that happening you water down the things you believe to be true and fair interpretations in the first place, if only on a personal level. I guess the takeaway is that if you take anything away from this video, I hope it's a new perspective and some tools and directions you can use to discover these songs and interpret them for yourself. Aside from that, I hope you enjoyed it. I'm really excited to hear the feedback on this. If you have anything to say, if you have any of your own interpretation you want to share, if you want to talk with people about Savanna or Beat and Beyond, or even like maybe any of the mid projects that I couldn't talk about, please do so in the comments. I think this should really be a space for that. And even if you don't have anything to say or you have questions, you can also drop them below. And if you just want to say what you had for dinner today, that's also fine, as long as it's all respectful and good and fun. And I'll sign off with that.